And so if you just look at the felony line, we're at 16,300 filings over the last 5 years. That's higher than Deschutes by quite a bit. That's higher than Lane, it's higher than Marion, it's higher than Clackamas, and it's almost as high as Washington County. And Washington County's population right now is about 620,000 people. So they got about 400,000 more people within their county than we have here.
COVID-19, the legalization of marijuana, Measure 110, criminal justice reform, and many other factors have significantly impacted our local justice system over the last several years in many complex ways. Here is the summary of trends related to prosecution, charges filed, and court cases seen by the District Attorney's Office and Jackson County Courts.
So on this slide, I'm just trying to show how long it's taking for us to resolve cases. So these are our pending murder cases that we have. So we've already had one in 22, and then in 21 we had 11, and so that's 20 beds that are being taken up in the jail by those folks, and the oldest one goes back to 2018. So carrying all of those older cases forward, it just adds to the amount of cases that any one deputy is handling. In the past, we used to give one murder case to a deputy, and when they resolved it, then they would go back in the rotation to get the next one. And I now have deputies that have 2, and some deputies have 3. So that's what's really affecting us. And then this is pending Measure 11 cases. This kind of shows how we're carrying those cases over. So we're carrying over the last 4 years 183 cases. In addition to all the new cases that are coming in. This is active cases that we're working. This isn't counting cases that are out on warrant status. So if I included the warrant status cases for each year, that would bump the numbers up pretty dramatically as well. On to the court.
So these are cases that have been filed through the courts. And so you can see that we've been pretty busy each year. In fact, very busy when you look compared to other courts, but the brown or the orange line is going to be misdemeanor cases filed. As you can see, fairly high, but the felony numbers are really high. We're looking at 2,199 filings for 2021 still, and we have our civil commitments are really high as well. So we're looking at a lot of times officers take people into custody on police officer holds, or maybe somebody's lodged, but then the issue of mental health comes up, and then those cases are diverted through the civil process and not necessarily the criminal process. If you look through the last 5 years of court filings, you look at Jackson, Deschutes, Lane, Marion, Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah counties, and so if you just look at the felony line, we're at 16,300 filings over the last 5 years. That's higher than Deschutes by quite a bit. That's higher than Lane, it's higher than Marion, it's higher than Clackamas, and it's almost as high as Washington County. And Washington County's population right now is about 620,000 people. So they got about 400,000 more people within their county than we have here. And they're surrounded, they're up in the metro area. So they certainly have a much higher, I'll say, transient population and people going through their county than we have. But this puts work on everybody much differently than other places because we're not resourced like these big counties.
Yeah, and Sheriff, on this slide, so like for deputy DAs, I have 21 deputy DAs in Jackson County. Deschutes, which is doing less than half of our cases in that time period, has 24 deputy DAs. Lane has 28. Marion has 33. Clackamas has 31. Washington, which is almost equal to what we're doing, has 41. And then, of course, Multnomah has 75. So it's a huge difference for per deputy caseloads when you start looking at that difference between number of deputy DAs.
You look at our court filings against other counties, we still have a huge backlog for the courts, and this sort of speaks to that, but something that we're working on, but with the pandemic, and then the numbers, and then more people being released every day, it's been harder and harder to get those cases going through our system. So I think that's another thing that we also have to look at when we look at how high our numbers are, and then the delays of those going to court.
I have always been concerned about getting cases through the court ever since I've shown up here. Of course, COVID made it horrible. But I think, and Tina has given me a little bit of encouragement with the numbers she showed me last week, that we are starting to trend in the right direction.
Here's just another piece of the workload that we see with warrants. The majority of the county warrants are entered either through MPD records or JCSO records. And as you can see, we've trended down over the last couple of years, but we're starting to trend back up. And, warrants would be on, people who fail to appear, for instance, or people who don't appear at all, or have some sort of a court obligation and don't show up and a warrant's entered. Or they could be a suspect in a crime and we've identified them and the district attorney could issue a warrant for their arrest. So that's another means a warrant could come out. You look in 2017, we had our highest number of warrants at 13,660. 10,000 were for FTA, and that's a significant problem. I think it still remains that today. We're starting to see that number come back up. We were down considerably, half of that number after a couple of years of having some better jail space and the FTA program. And then, as we had to reduce space again at our facility, we're starting to see that FTA number crawl back up. And I know that's a huge issue for our judges and everybody else. It contributes to some significant workloads when somebody doesn't show up for court.
We just have a lot of paperwork that we just have to do over and over. But another thing that it really affects is kind of court capacity. Even though we don't have social distancing, we're trying to keep, the number of people in the courthouse as low as we can. And we just have to keep resetting cases over and over again. So we might not have the number of people scheduled that we actually could get through if people showed up. So yeah, that is a big problem.